Welcome to Food Investigations, a multi-part series exploring the toxic chemicals and additives that are in your food that the food companies don't want you to know about. My name's Mike Adams. I'm the Health Ranger. I'm the only private individual in the world who owns and operates a forensic food laboratory using state-of-the-art scientific instrumentation capable of detecting contaminants and heavy metals and organic molecules at parts per billion concentrations. If you look at labs.naturalnews.com, you'll see some of the results of some of my research, and there's a lot more coming up soon. So welcome to this series. Now, let's start with the big picture here. More and more people are waking up these days to the idea that they're being lied to by the establishment. People are waking up everywhere to the idea that the banks, for example, are ripping you off and the Federal Reserve is printing new money, thereby devaluing your money, the money that you already have earned and paid taxes on and maybe put in the bank. That's getting less and less valuable every day because of the actions of the Fed. We know we're being lied to by politicians and bureaucrats. We're lied to by the EPA over the lead in the water supply. And it's not just Flint, Michigan either. It's many other places across America are contaminated with lead. We're being lied to by the FDA about the safety of drugs. Many drugs are toxic. Statin drugs, for example, cause diabetes, they cause dementia, and they cause muscle weakness and chronic fatigue and rapid accelerated aging. But we're not being told that. We're just being told, oh, these drugs are safe and they're fine. They're okay. Go ahead, take those drugs. We're also being told that the food supply is safe. And this is a big lie that I'm going to expose in detail in this Food Investigations series. And by the way, if you want to read my work in print form, you can go to naturalnews.com or check out my podcast at healthrangerreport.com. So let's cover some of the groups of toxins that are found in foods. But, well, first let me talk about the economic angle here. The food manufacturers are not interested in your health. So let's get that out of the way. Let's dispel any illusions of thinking that the large food companies are interested in you being healthy. No, they're not. They're interested in you buying their products over and over and over again and having as much profit margin as possible, which means that they want to use the cheapest ingredients possible in order to maximize their profits. So how do they produce cheap ingredients? Well, here's one way that will shock you. If you take food materials and you process them and refine them, let's say raw cane sugar, which is full of minerals and full of nutrients, if you refine it and process it and you pull out all the garbage, that is the white sugar, the refined carbohydrates, then you can pull that out and sell that as a food processor to food companies that use that sugar for breakfast cereals and children's drinks and what have you. And it's very, very inexpensive because all the nutrients have been taken out. So what happens with sugar is that it's processed and divided into two piles. One pile, if you could imagine, a sugar factory and there's a pile of raw materials. One pile is all the nutrients and the minerals and the things that are healthy in sugar. And then a second pile is just the refined white carbohydrates that cause diabetes and obesity and disease. Well, that pile, the white sugar pile, gets sold for use in human foods. The other pile of the minerals and all the nutrients gets sold off to use in animal feed because ranchers know that they need to keep their animals healthy because there is not Obamacare for ranch animals. So they know they need to feed their animals all these nutrients and minerals, and that's where they get them. They take them out of the sugar, out of the raw cane sugar, feed those to animals, and then humans get the refined garbage that causes disease, which is very, very cheap and inexpensive. So if you look across the food supply and you find how much stuff is made out of sugar or, even worse, high fructose corn syrup, Everything it seems is made with this, including your ketchup, your pasta sauce, your salad dressings often are made with high fructose corn syrup. So in order to maximize this profit potential, they are buying the cheapest, most disease-promoting ingredients imaginable to start. Now, let's talk about corn. Corn is subsidized by the federal government, and it's usually genetically modified. It's incredibly cheap to grow and harvest and turn into food. And this is why corn is found in almost everything. You have not just corn flakes and corn tortillas, but you have, of course, maltodextrin, which is found in thousands of different foods at your grocery store. Maltodextrin is derived, it is a starch, actually a diabetes-promoting starch, that's derived from genetically modified corn. And by the way, this corn, being GMO, is genetically engineered to produce its own insecticide inside each and every grain, so that if an insect tries to eat the corn, it dies. Well, now you are eating the corn, and we're seeing more and more cancer, we're seeing infertility, we're seeing digestion problems across the population. And many of us who are food science researchers believe that this is linked to the Bt toxin that is found in genetically modified corn. So think about it. You are eating an insecticide every time you take a bite of a corn-based cereal, for example, that it isn't organic. And as a side note, organic, of course, does not allow GMOs. So organic is very important. It's the way to go to avoid all of this. But most people aren't eating organic all the time. Canola oil. This is another very, very cheap source of genetically modified oil. It's from a plant that used to be called the rapeseed plant, but they changed the name for marketing purposes. They wanted to call it something nicer, so they made up the name canola. They just made it up. And so now canola oil is in everything. Check your salad dressings. Even your salad dressings that say olive oil on the front label, if you read the ingredients, you'll find that they're mostly made from canola oil with a little bit of olive oil thrown in. But you notice the front label doesn't say canola oil salad dressing because nobody would buy it. So it says instead olive oil. Just one of the many deceptions used by food companies. So if you look at these ingredients, sugar, corn, canola oil, and you throw in sodium as well, these ingredients, these four ingredients, make up the bulk of the processed food supply. Almost everything that you are buying is a combination of sugar, salt, corn, and canola. And you'd be shocked if you look at the food labels and start to really examine just how true this is. It's rather astonishing, in fact. You think, wow, how many different ways can you combine corn and canola oil and sugar and salt? There are thousands of different ways, and they are called all the different products. Children's breakfast cereals, nutrition drinks, even often are made with some of this stuff. High fructose corn syrup and so on. Snacks, snack chips, baking mixes, and so on. Now, another main ingredient is wheat, of course. And wheat is not yet genetically modified, but it is highly processed. So if you get white bleached flour, that means they've taken all the nutrients out of it. So the bottom line is, if you look at what makes up the food supply, it's all these cheap, high profit, raw materials that are stripped of their nutrition, so that when you eat them, you get diabetes, you get cancer, you get heart disease. And this is just the beginning. This is only phase 1 that I'm talking about. Now let's talk about the chemical additives that they put into the food on top of all the garbage, the raw materials that I've just covered. You see, because these foods are so stripped of all their minerals and all their nutrients and all their phytochemicals, meaning plant-based chemicals, which are healing and often medicinal, because of that, these foods taste very, very bland. So they have to use artificial chemicals to enhance the taste. For this, they use sodium, not just sodium by itself, but monosodium glutamate, MSG. And then they hide MSG, which is known as an excitotoxin. They hide it in other ingredients. For example, torula yeast or autolyzed proteins, hydrolyzed proteins, or yeast extract is a very, very big one. Look for the ingredient called yeast extract. That means it contains hidden forms of MSG. So they use this to make their junk foods taste savory. You know, snack chips will often have MSG in them. Pick up a bag of Doritos and check it out. You'll be shocked to know what's in there. But it's not only taste that they need to enhance in these foods. They need to enhance the color as well. So for color, they use artificial coloring chemicals that are derived from petrochemicals. Yeah, they're actually made out of oil, in essence. They're synthesized from petroleum hydrocarbons. Yeah, it's quite an elaborate setup. And then this is used to make like the Doritos to make them look more red. It's all artificial. And not only are they doing this with coloring chemicals, they're also doing it with chemical preservatives such as sodium nitrite. Let me tell you about sodium nitrite because this will absolutely shock you. You are eating cancer every time you're eating a hot dog or beef jerky or pepperoni or deli meats, any kind of processed meats. Now, fresh meats are fine. They don't have this ingredient called sodium nitrite, but bacon has it. Breakfast sausage has it. Hot dogs has it. Sodium nitrite is a cancer-causing chemical that is used by the food industry for two purposes. It's a preservative in that it stops the growth of botulism in meat products, but it's also a color fixer. It's used to make the meats look fresh and pink. You see, without this, hot dogs would be gray. Your bacon would be gray. All these meats would be putrid gray because they're not fresh. They've been sitting on the shelf for a very long time. So they use sodium nitrite to make them look pink so that you think they're fresh. Again, this is all about deception. But sodium nitrite, when it combines with the hydrochloric acid in your stomach, just using basic high school chemistry, it forms nitrosamines. Nitrosamines cause cancer. And this is why the consumption of processed meat is linked to a very high increase in colorectal cancer and pancreatic cancer and leukemia and brain tumors in children and other types of cancers as well. So remember, this is all for the convenience of the food manufacturers. They want to make the money. They want to sell products that look good and taste good, but they're doing it all by deception. They take the nutrients out of the food so that their ingredients are cheaper. They use monosodium glutamate, artificial chemical taste enhancers, artificial color enhancers, and other additives, preservatives, for example, to give their foods a long shelf life and make them look deceptively fresh, tricking you into buying their foods thinking, hey, this tastes good, this looks good, but it's all a deception. Isn't that fascinating? So is anyone surprised by this? You live in the world. You know the mainstream media is deceiving you all the time. You know the government is deceiving you all the time. You know the banks are deceiving you. You know that your phone company is deceiving you. All the tricks in the contract. You know that your favorite websites, like let's say Google or Yahoo or Microsoft or Hotmail, they're all selling your data to third parties, mining your data, and they have backdoors to the NSA. They're deceiving you. So you live in a world that's full of deception, and food is no exception to that deception. That's the primary message here. And this is rarely talked about in the mainstream media because the media is given huge money to promote the most processed, chemically laced foods, because that's where the profits are. So if you look at the mainstream media, they're being given money by all the big food manufacturers to promote junk food, to promote sodas, which is high fructose corn syrup and toxic phosphoric acid that eats away at your bones and your teeth and your jawline. and gives you diabetes. It's very, very toxic stuff. The media is making all this money to push all of this junk food that is destroying your health, giving you diabetes, cancer, heart disease, Alzheimer's, kidney damage, liver disorders, skin disorders, sexual dysfunction, mood disorders, you name it. It comes from the food and the toxic chemicals that are in it. So what's the solution? Well, let me share a little bit of background. So I've been running naturalnews.com for over a decade. I don't know, 13, 14 years now. And one year we wanted to start an online store because we weren't happy with the quality of the products that people were buying somewhere else. So we would do a story about, let's say, cinnamon, which can help regulate blood sugar. And then people would go out, they'd read our story, they'd get excited about cinnamon, and they would go out and buy cinnamon from all these other online stores that were selling crap quality cinnamon, like Amazon.com, right? It's the lowest quality that you can find for any herb, any bulk herb or food or superfood. Amazon.com is the crap quality. It's like the McDonald's of online retailing. They'll sell anything, no matter what. It doesn't matter how much lead is in it. Doesn't matter how much chemical additives are in it or MSG. Hey, Amazon.com will sell it. They'll sell you all kinds of poison. They will sell you cancer in a box as long as it makes them money, because they have no ethics, you see. They're just selling anything for profit. So we decided we want to start an online store that tests everything for the contaminants and tests everything for purity and identity and sells only laboratory validated foods and supplements and superfoods, the kinds of things that I would take myself. And so we began the investigation. This was many years ago. And we found that when we would buy samples from raw materials providers, that a lot of the times those samples would be heavily contaminated with lead or cadmium or arsenic or pesticide and herbicide chemicals. Often, even when they were labeled organic, if they were grown in China, the organic turned out to be a total fraud. And I'll talk about that more later. So we realized that we were going to have to do a lot of laboratory testing. And if you look at the lab testing, it can cost you $250 to test one sample for heavy metals or pesticides. And if you test everything for that food, it can cost you $1,000. Well, we knew we were going to do so much testing that it actually made economic sense for us to build our own laboratory. So back in 2013, we built our first lab, and we invested in ICP-MS instrumentation made by Agilent, which detects heavy metals at very trace levels. And I studied inorganic chemistry and got consultants to train me on the instrument. And I put in many, many hours, I don't know how many hundreds of hours, on the instrument. And I became very, very good at testing for heavy metals. And we began making that part of our system. So if we looked at a raw material that was coming in from somebody that we wanted to make into a food or a superfood, if it tested high heavy metals, we would reject it. And so we became known to our readers and customers as the only place to get laboratory validated and verified foods and superfoods and supplements that are low in heavy metals or no heavy metals at all. We have a rating system. We don't sell anything that isn't grade A or better. And there's a lot of stuff out there that's B or C or D or F, and we reject all that. So if you're interested in this, by the way, it's at store.naturalnews.com. That's where you can find all of this, store.naturalnews.com. We lab test everything. Every single thing that we sell, we lab test, and we make sure that it's clean of heavy metals. Now, we have since expanded that laboratory, because we found all kinds of crazy stuff in other people's foods. Like we found lead in the organic brown rice protein, just called rice protein, that was being imported from China. We found over 5,000 parts per billion lead in that. And a couple of years ago, we did a big story on that, and made some waves in the industry, and some companies decided to clean up their supply, and they've made major improvements. Other companies went into a state of denial, and I'm talking about organic superfood companies, went into a denial and started attacking me instead of cleaning up their product, claiming, oh, it's naturally occurring lead, which is complete nonsense, because if you grow rice in California, there's no lead in it, or virtually none. If you grow the same rice in China, it's full of lead. Why is that? Because of the industrial pollution in China and all the smokestacks from all the factories churning out lead and cadmium and other toxic metals and mercury, and all that falls onto the farmlands. And after it falls onto the farmlands, then it goes into the soil, and it gets taken up by the plants, and then it goes into your food. So it's not naturally occurring. It's actually industrial pollution. So now we've opened up a brand new laboratory, a $1.5 million facility that we built using sales proceeds from our online store. And we have opened up a massive new section called organic chemistry, where we use liquid chromatography combined with mass spectrometry to identify the accurate molecular mass of every pesticide and herbicide and many other chemicals. We have a database now of over 25,000 chemicals that we're searching for in all the raw materials and all the foods. We're the only ones in the world who do this. The only ones. And now everything that we sell is laboratory tested and validated for all of these things. We check it against pesticides, herbicides, veterinary medicines, various chemicals, pharmaceuticals, and also heavy metals, so that we know the foods that we are selling to the public and that we're eating ourselves, because I'm my own best customer. I buy huge volumes from my own store because I did the lab testing. I know it's clean. We are now the only store in the world, the only retailer of foods, superfoods, and dietary supplements that is engaged in this detailed scrutinizing of everything that we manufacture and everything that we sell. We're the only ones in the world. And this is a big, sort of a growing secret, if you will, across food consumers, that, yeah, they can go to Whole Foods or they can go to Amazon. They can buy things cheaper at Amazon and maybe more conveniently at Whole Foods, but you can't get anything cleaner. The stuff that if you want really, really clean food that doesn't have the chemicals in it, doesn't have the heavy metals, doesn't have the synthetic chemical additives, you get it from the natural news store. That's what we're known for. And that's why so many people, if they've been diagnosed with cancer or diabetes and they have made a decision to clean up their lives and clean up their diets, they come to the natural news store, because that's where they know they're not going to get lead, they're not going to get herbicides, they're not going to get chemical pesticides, they're not going to get that stuff, because we test everything. So now our lab is growing like crazy. We're about to receive international ISO accreditation, which means we'll be able to start testing for other companies. We're going to be announcing that later this year. So other companies will come to us. It's already been happening behind the scenes. They come to us and they want us to test their materials and their products and all their individual ingredients and make sure that their stuff is clean before they manufacture. And I've been helping some companies for free, just doing that without charge, to help some companies that I know clean up their products and make sure that they're super safe and super clean. But we'll be doing this across the industry sometime later this year. So not only is the Natural News Store the place to go to get the cleanest products, but we are actually going to be doing the science for all the other companies that want super clean foods as well. Because, you see, I'm not going to bore you with technical details here, but we are passionate about clean food, whereas other labs out there, I mean, there are other laboratories that can do basic testing, but they're not clean food advocates. They're not into clean food. And frankly, they don't have the technology that we have. We have technology that's so advanced and so new that the hardware has only existed for 1 year. And the methodology is so advanced for what I call the fragmentation fingerprinting of organic molecules that there isn't even a single science paper that has yet been published on the methodology that we're using. It is so advanced. We've had the top PhDs in the world train me and my lab quality director on how to analyze organic molecules using this advanced technique. It's so new that even the FDA doesn't use it yet. Even the doping agency, what are they called, that Lance Armstrong got in trouble with, they don't use this technique. If they did, they would have found the drugs in his blood years earlier, because this is so much more accurate. USADA, is that what they're called? USADA, I think, something like that, the anti-doping agency. So we not only can this technology find pesticides and herbicides in food, we can find drugs in blood. We can find glyphosate in urine. We can find mercury in your hair. I mean, we're not offering that. We're not saying send us your hair, or definitely not send us your blood or urine. No, thank you. We're not in that business. But we could, and I do test my own hair, and I do test my own urine, by the way, for heavy metals, because I want to know what's coming out of my body. You see, I eat the clean food that we offer at the Natural News Store, and I want to know if I'm being exposed to other sources of heavy metals anywhere in the environment or in other foods that I might consume, or water sources and so on. So I'm testing my hair and my urine pretty frequently. It gives you an amazing view of what's in your food. So I'm wrapping up part 1 here for foodinvestigations.com, but let me summarize. The message is the food companies are selling you poison. They're doing it for profit. They're selling you foods that they know cause cancer and diabetes and heart disease and many other horrible conditions. They're doing it for money, and they're not telling you the truth about all the different chemicals that end up in the foods you're eating. For example, they don't list pesticides on the label. You don't know which pesticides are in there. Not on the label, right? So you have to have a science lab in order to see it. And that's what I do. I've got the science lab. We built it. We put in the time, the study, to master the instrumentation, which is very complex, very, very difficult. We're talking PhD level work here, really beyond PhD level work. And we do this because we're passionate about clean food. Because we think that everybody has a right to eat clean food and to know what's in their food. That this is a basic human right. And it's also important for a society and for families and households to be able to eat clean food, drink clean water, and find out what's really in the products that they're buying. We're all about transparency, and we're all about education, public education, to let you know what you're consuming so that you can make informed decisions to make better choices, to avoid the heavy metals, avoid the herbicides, avoid the pesticides, avoid the MSG, avoid the sodium nitrite in the processed meats. That is where we empower you. So I'll continue this in another chapter here on foodinvestigations.com. If you're listening to this somewhere else, just go to foodinvestigations.com to find the other parts. I'm going to talk about some of the background, the history of how foods became so contaminated. I'm going to talk about the corruption of the FDA, the EPA, and the USDA. And I'm going to talk more about the science of analyzing what's really in the foods and some of the shocking results that we are seeing. For example, we found something in dog treats that will make your dog retarded. And I mean that literally. So, yeah, I know. If you imagine your dog being neurologically damaged, it shouldn't be funny. This is happening because of what's in some of the dog treats. So I'll talk about that in the next segment. You're listening to Mike Adams, the Health Ranger, at foodinvestigations.com.